So to round off NAMM 2025, PRS Guitars held a private celebration event to mark their 40th anniversary. Now to close off the night, of course, PRS's biggest artist, John Mayer, would take the stage and perform a few different songs. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing the tones, taking a listen to them, as well as discussing the gear that John was using for this performance. And just right off the bat, I have to say, I think it was some of the most inspired playing I've seen from John in a while. You could just tell when he was up there, he was having so much fun and just really being in the moment. And jamming with Mark Lettieri's band as well was just, they just were so tight sounding. Like, just to play all of John's songs like that, they did fantastic. Mark Lettieri is a fantastic guitar player too. It just was a really great event overall. It looked like super jealous. Some of my friends were down there watching it live. So yeah, it definitely looked like a really great time. So let's take a listen first to one of the highlights. Well, they're all highlights, let's be honest. But the Wild Blue solo, I really love from this performance. Let's take a listen to it first.
You'll never know the unlikely beauty in letting you
Even just listening to the Wild Blue solo performance, you can just feel and hear kind of, it's like the spark in John's playing, if that makes sense. It's just absolutely fantastic. Now let's talk about the amp rig here first, because the amp rig is pretty interesting. During this event, they had lots of people coming on and playing the stage. There were lots of great artists, great guitar players would come and kind of help celebrate PRS's 40th anniversary. When John took the stage, the one amp that right away I noticed, and I think everyone pretty much noticed, was his Dumble Ultraphonics Bandmaster, the new one that he got, that he played with Dead & Company at the Sphere in 2024. That amplifier quite clearly seems to be his current favorite amplifier. We've seen it, I believe, every single time John's played live since he's acquired it, or since we at least knew he acquired it, pretty much from the start of the residency with Dead & Company at the Sphere all the way till now, even like the Harvest Moon Festival with Neil Young. That's the only amp John brought. It's clear this is kind of the rig that he is feeling at the moment. So right away when I saw that amplifier sitting on top of the Alessandro cabinet, I was like, all right, that's John's amp rig. He probably only brought one for this performance, as there were so many other guitar players and artists performing. However, from a few people who were actually there at the event, there was an intermission before John took the stage, and 3 amplifiers were actually set up for John, it looks like. The middle one being the most interesting amp. It's a PRS DGT-15, a very kind of out of left field choice for John, I feel like, and really the amplifier that I feel like should have been there, should have been the J-Mod. I thought that if John was going to play for the 40th anniversary celebration for PRS, the amp you would have guaranteed have seen him use would have been the J-Mod, his signature Paul Reed Smith amp. So I was definitely a bit shocked not to see that amplifier on stage. It's definitely a cool part of John's history and his sound, and just to not see that amplifier, I definitely was a little bit surprised by, but maybe kind of in lieu of the J-Mod, John was just using one of the DGT-15s that they had kind of at the venue through one of the cabinets as well. It's kind of an interesting amplifier. It does the clean thing obviously very well. 15 watts though, so a little bit lower wattage compared to what we're used to seeing John use live. But then the amplifier next to it is one that we are very familiar with at this point, and it's John's Fender Twin. So kind of the pairing of that Ultraphonics modded Bandmaster with the Twin Reverb seems to be John's main kind of go-to combo right now. Of course, we saw that combination with Dead & Company at the Sphere as well. So the fact that he's bringing the Twin also kind of makes for a cool combination. So that's also kind of an indicator that all 3 of them would have been John's, because you have the Twin, which I doubt anyone else would have brought the Twin to use that night, and if it was set up before John took the stage, it just kind of all makes sense. The DG15 is just kind of the one that's a little peculiar, throwing things off just a little bit in my opinion when I was looking at the shots of the amps. I was just kind of like, that's kind of cool, kind of interesting, but definitely not expected, and I hope we get to see the J-Mod again soon. If not for this performance, maybe another one in the future. And in terms of the guitar, of course, what guitar would you expect John to be playing other than a Silver Sky? He's playing the faded black T satin one with the prototype sticker next to kind of the trem bar system. Seems to be the one that he's been playing really since the Sob Rock era, if it is in fact the exact same guitar. It's very hard to tell, but it could be just a newer one that they place a sticker in the exact same spot. Who knows, maybe road testing different specifications, different changes to the pickups, the neck, whatever, it's all within the realm of possibility. One thing though that I think is interesting is that because we get such good footage from PRS in this performance of the House of Blues, you see on the back of the headstock, it has just a little black, like almost sticker covering something up. Now actually the only thing that I can think of that makes sense with this is that they, and when I say they I mean Jeremy, John, and Paul, they knew that this performance was going to be professionally filmed, and maybe there's just a little designation that this is prototype, 25A or whatever it is. And it may be just a slight tweaks to the pickups or like the neck, something, you never know. So maybe they just, because they knew it was going to be professionally shot, they just covered up whatever designation that was, just something on the back of the headstock to indicate what exact Silver Sky this is. And maybe John has multiple faded black T satins with the prototype sticker on it, but they're just slight variances in specs. Maybe, as the Silver Sky, as John has said before, they have like a running, I think it was like 3 to 4 year outlook. He had said something along that line where, they're constantly thinking about evolving and updating it and tweaking specifications, because it's just fun to do so, right? As John keeps using the guitar live, keeps getting to experiment with it, tweak it or add little things, and that's kind of how the Dead Spec Silver Sky came to be as well, right? So that's the only thing I can think of. It'd be pretty cool if that's the case, but I honestly just have no idea. I'm just kind of thinking out loud in the video for you guys. All right, I'm reshooting the back half of this video because when it comes to the pedal board, there were a few things that I was discussing and debating on based on the shots at the time I shot the video that we had. But since I recorded the original draft of the video, we have had some new photos come out of John's pedal board. So they answer all the things I kind of was debating and humming and hawing about. So reshooting and kind of cleaning that up a little bit for you guys. Now, the pedal board that John brought to this performance is what you could call his B-rig. And what I mean by that is John's primary pedal board would be like what you would call the pedal board he used for the Dead & Company residency at the Sphere, or the Sob Rock pedal board. The massive kind of trailer trash pedal board that has 3 rows on it, pedals that John doesn't necessarily even need, but they're there in case they just spur of the moment decide to throw in a different song that's not in the main kind of core of the set list, but they can play it and he doesn't have a pedal that he might need or a sound he might want holding him back that's not on the board, if you guys get what I'm saying. So the B-rig is just a smaller pedal board that John would bring to like guest appearances, stuff like that, that contains the essentials, kind of his favorite pedals in the moment and kind of the core fundamentals of his sound. So if you're ever wanting to create a John Mayer style pedal board, the B-rig is always a really great pedal board to take inspiration from because it does have those essentials and kind of the main things John would want on a pedal board of his. So the pedal board starts off with the TC Electronics Polytune 3, the Keeley Katana version 1, the Exotic Effects Super Clean, then the JHS Pedals box it later, and the next pedal is the Klon Centaur. However, this is one thing that I was really debating on in the original kind of draft of this video, is that the enclosure is different than what we're used to seeing from John, because John's had a blacked out version of the Klon Centaur on his pedal board since the North American leg of the 2019 World Tour. Between the first leg, kind of in Europe and Australia and New Zealand, to North America, sometime in between there, in between legs, he blacked out his Klon Centaur, and it's been that way ever since. In the original video, the original footage I had, it was some kind of behind the scenes, behind the stage footage from this event that was posted to PRS's Instagram page. You could see the pedal board, and the Klon was clearly reflecting more of the stage lights and more light in general than it would have had it have been that blacked out version. So without getting a better shot like this one here, it was kind of hard to say for 100% certainty what it was, but this is dead on proof. I think this is afterwards where they might just be, you know, talking on stage or something, or like the lights are all on in between songs even, it could be. But you can clearly tell here that there's no light trickery going on. The Klon Centaur is in the silver enclosure. What is interesting though here is that, okay, so the Klon Centaur, it was blacked out. We have some really great shots of what it looked like. It's not like a smooth paint that was done to it. It's almost like a plastidip or some kind of covering almost that you think they could just peel off and it wouldn't damage the paint, hence why I kind of say like plastidip or something. So did John just take off the black covering on the Klon, or did he get a new one or need a new enclosure or something? But this is really cool because we just haven't seen John with a silver Klon enclosure, like a regular enclosure, for quite a while now. Now, it is also possible that John did get a second Klon, because the Klon clone of choice that he's been using is the J-Rocket Audio Jeff Archer. That has been kind of what you'd see on his B-Rig pedal board. So did he get just another Klon? Because John has said in one of Josh Scott's comments, he mentioned that he only owned one of them, and that was just the one he had always used. So maybe he got another one just to throw on the B-Rig set. Then on the main touring pedal board, he has one, and then he can just have another one that's just on the B-Rig. It's possible. Without getting a better shot of the enclosure though, it's really difficult to tell, but I would be kind of willing to bet it's just a new silver Klon that he's added to his collection. Last pedal on that front row there is going to be the Ibanez TS10. John obviously owns multiple versions of this pedal. Interestingly about this one though is that the LED is that kind of almost yellow kind of color, like a yellowy green. John does have multiple TS10s, but throughout the years we've seen one TS10 that just has a different LED. Maybe it broke or something, that's just what they replaced it with, or maybe that's just to help them kind of designate if this one maybe was one of Stevie's or something. Who knows, but just kind of something interesting that's going on with the TS10 too. All right, moving up to the back row now. This is the other thing I was trying to see, and just based on what we had before, you couldn't tell. And it's the Way Huge Aquapus, but it's a Mark II version. One of the last times we saw John with a kind of B-Rig style pedal board, he actually had the Mark I Aquapus on it, and you could tell because of the input jack for the power cable, it's circular on the original Mark I versions and kind of more rectangular and square and more set in like flush on the Mark II versions. That's how you can tell. So we knew that John was using a Mark I on kind of one of the last B-Rig pedal boards we saw, but this one here, you can just tell in the lighting and everything here of this pedal, it's a Mark II version. The next pedal is really cool. It's the Origin Effects Deluxe 61 Trem. And I've done a little bit of research on this pedal, and it just sounds like it's going to be absolutely brilliant, like replicating the Brown Face Deluxe Trem system pretty faithfully, all analog. Really cool to see John kind of using a different modulation pedal, and it's one we've seen him have on his boards, you know, here and there a little bit, like the Billy Joel Performance. This is basically the exact same pedal board, more or less, when John joined him back in October of 2024. The next pedal is the blacked out Boss CE2, and John also owns more than one CE2, obviously, in his studio at Henson Studios. You can see a regular blue CE2. He's used one on his pedal board as well, I believe, with the Lizzie McAlpine Performance, and then just the standard kind of more commonly seen blacked out CE2 here, then the Providence Chrono Delay, and then lastly, the Strymon Flint. And noting here in the shot, you can see that the reverb side is on. Okay, now at this point, I think we should take a listen to the outro solo from Gravity, because it is so good. And then I'm going to give just a very brief high-level overview of what kind of pedals I think John was using for the different performances from the night. Without just getting direct footage of him stepping on things, it's very difficult to tell, but I'll just give my kind of insight in what we can hear as well as going on, and kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea at least of what John would have been doing and when. But first, let's take a listen to that Gravity solo.
Just give me where the light is. Thank you. One more time for Mark Lettieri and the band. Bob Reynolds.
John Mayer, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I think you guys can agree that that gravity solo was just awesome. And like I've said at the beginning of the video, definitely some very inspired playing from John, you know, being in a room full of guitar players, like he even mentions after Gravity, and they kind of close the night out. You know, it's funny. He joked about how there's like people in the room who could play guitar better than him, so he was a little nervous, but he clearly was very inspired and, you know, maybe a bit of a different mindset when you're playing to a room full of guitar players. You can kind of like, all right, like, you know, there's a lot more musicians here. I can kind of, you know, some different ideas maybe pop into his head and stuff, but that solo was just so awesome. Now, the one thing that I would say would be kind of a pretty safe constant for the night would be the reverb side of the Strymon Flint. If you even just think of the Dumble Ultraphonics Bandmaster alone, that doesn't have an onboard reverb, so John would be running that just to provide some subtle reverb for that amplifier to make it not just 100% dry sounding, as evidenced by even this shot of the pedal board that we have where you can see the reverb side is on. I would just bet that it's on pretty much the entire time. Now, as far as anything else that would be always on, the Way Huge Octopus would be probably the next closest thing to the Strymon Flint's reverb side. For Vultures and Wild Blue, it would have been on the entire time. That's just something we've seen John consistently do for both of those songs. Very high chance that it was on for all of Gravity. Also, Calm with the Breeze, it's really hard to say, but Way Huge Octopus, I'd be pretty confident in saying Gravity, and then for sure, Vultures and Wild Blue. Now, in terms of the drives and that kind of setup, when you think of something like Vultures, John would rely more on like the Keeley Katana and like more clean boosts to give him some of those lines, and then the TS10 as well, just for a little bit of overdrive for the soloing. It wouldn't be really anything in terms of full gain stacking for Vultures. Usually, when we then go into like Wild Blue, the first solo would probably be like the Klon Centaur, maybe a clean boost stacked into the Klon Centaur. Then for the outro solo, you could expect kind of more gain stacking between the Klon and the TS10. And obviously during Wild Blue 2, you can see John's kind of doing a little bit of play with the volume knob as well for those tones. Then for something like Gravity's outro solo, that you could pretty much guarantee would be like a Keeley Katana or the Super Clean stacking into the Klon Centaur and the TS10 for the kind of grand finale, ultimate kind of like John Mayer sort of tone. And speaking of the outro solo of Gravity, it sounds like there's more modulation going on than the normal and kind of just very subtle, beautiful sounding harmonic trem. Based on what John has on the board and what you can hear, I think we're hearing the CE2 actually doing a little bit of chorus on the outro solo. And that kind of, I think, would line up too, because in this shot here, you actually get a good enough look where you can see John's CE2 settings, and it's not set aggressively at all. So I think that's what we're hearing there in terms of the outro solo of Gravity, and personally, I thought it sounded really great. And the only other things that I can think of would be like the chrono delay, adding some longer delay for Vultures, a slapback, and a longer delay is kind of the quintessential Vultures main bass tone, both delays going. Call Me the Breeze would kind of be one that you would think some trem would be added on, even just very subtly. It's really hard to tell the settings on John's Deluxe 61, but that pedal to me kind of seems like, okay, you said it, just not a very aggressive, deep trem, but something subtle, giving a little bit of movement, because it's kind of got that country twang and vibe to the sound, especially John's solo for Call Me the Breeze too, I thought was really great. As well, like I said, the whole performance was just awesome, honestly. But the Deluxe 61, that could kind of fit the vibe. It's hard to tell based on the audio, but you know, I'm just throwing it out there that maybe just providing just a little bit of modulation, even just for a feel thing for John, that could kind of be a possibility, and that's something that I don't know, I kind of think might make some sort of sense. Anyways, you guys, that's my kind of full rundown of the gear and tones from PRS's 40th anniversary celebration. Congrats to PRS Guitars. I mean, such a phenomenal brand, and their partnership with John has for sure been a highlight for a lot of people, obviously. So it's going to be just exciting to see what the next 40 years, you know, what happens in those, and future partnerships with John, maybe another amp, another guitar model, who knows, but I don't know, I'm pretty excited to see what happens. So yeah, huge congrats to PRS, and yeah, Mark Lettieri's band and John sounded phenomenal too. Really great night. Go and listen to some of the footage. Just sounds amazing. Thanks for watching, you guys. As always, anything else you guys ever want to see me cover, leave it in the comments down below. And until the next video, you guys, take care, and I'll see you on that one.